1 week season.
Hey, and welcome in, OWS fam. So glad you are with us. We are back in the DFS lab, back at it again. As always, this show presented by 1 week season, where we build a lineup on DraftKings and use it as a way to talk through the upcoming slate. In this case, looking ahead towards week 12, it is Tuesday, November 19th. So obviously a very early look at the slate. I'm your host, Cheeseman, and I am joined now by Hilow. And Hilo, for me, looking back briefly at week 11, it was good and bad. I thought I was going to have a great week because I had pieces of I had some Jerry Jeudy. I had some Anthony Richardson. I had a lot of these great pieces. And then, midway through or just, into the third and fourth quarters of the early window, I realized that I didn't have any Lions and that was going to kill me. So I ended up being down like 50%. Wasn't a terrible week, but if a week that was frustrating because I felt like it could have been huge and it just wasn't. So how was it for you?
About the same, man. I was obviously the architect of the Kendrick Bourne call at OWS, and that turned out really well. We mentioned that Jeudy was one of the better pure leverage plays on the slate.
Yes, that's where I got it from,
well.
The Slate podcast.
Yeah, Anthony Richardson naked was a mainstay in my builds. It was just like, if you didn't have Amon-Ra, you weren't winning anything. Goff, you could have played with him, but like Amon-Ra was kind of the key piece there.
And Taysom Hill, dude. Playing every position. I saw a post on X, like a meme saying, "What position do you play?" And he says, "Football. That's my position. It's just football." That was Taysom Hill, man.
Yeah, dude. I really want him to get like a run one, pass one, catch one game.
That would be sweet.
He's like the only player in the past 40 years that has that like within his weekly range of outcomes. But like we've talked all season at OWS how like, hey, there's this guy Taysom Hill. He's kind of important to this offense. He's probably going to ruin a slate at some point. We've said it since week 1, and then like I wasn't on him when he does. It's like the optimal roster last week was just something that I will never have. I will never be close to. So like Amon-Ra St. Brown, after what he had, let me see, he had one game of double-digit targets before that. Yeah, one game. And it was like the Lions just kept their foot on the gas. This is a team that we've seen like control game environments before. They just kept their foot on the gas. They're like, I don't know whether it's they're getting their team like fully tuned for the playoffs or
same here.
Or what.
I was like, are they trying to like put Jared Goff into the MVP conversation, or is it just like, hey, he threw 5 picks last week. Let's give the guy some love and let him, put up a huge day or something.
Yeah, might have been. I mean, it might have been a lot of a combination of all those things. But like, if you didn't have Amon-Ra, obviously he was the top raw points getter on the week. 11 of 11 for 161 and 2. If you didn't have that, you weren't winning. And I just was not going to get to Amon-Ra on this slate. I was not going to get to 2 cheap tight ends on the slate. It just was not going to happen. So like if you had Taysom Hill and you played him with Jonnu Smith, like you were dancing. If not, you weren't winning shit. So like, I don't know. I could have gotten to Taysom. I did not. I could have gotten to Taysom because I did not like the Alvin Kamara chalk on the slate. So he made a very, very clear pivot. And that's just something that like I'm always considering. So like I could have gotten there in my process. I didn't this week because I only played 3 rosters. But the other, like Jonnu Smith, I was never getting to. Amon-Ra, I was never getting to on the slate. So yeah, I mean, and then it was weird too, because like George Kittle came into the weekend questionable and then was ruled out after the initial games had kicked off. So CMC was picking up a lot of ownership, and CMC, like we'll just put like the San Francisco run game sees like a 40% dip in efficiency with George Kittle off the field. So Alvin Kamara was bad chalk in my eyes. CMC turned into bad chalk after Kittle was ruled out. So it was this weird slate where like you kind of had to just have 2 pieces. You had to have Taysom, you had to have Amon-Ra, or you weren't winning. And then like, it's just like we saw a bunch of just like Detroit Lions team overstacks because like each back scored around 20 points. It was like 19 for Gibbs and 24 for Dave Montgomery. And then Goff obviously had one of the top raw points scores on the slate. Amon-Ra, you needed it or you weren't winning. And then JMO also like went 3 for 101. So it was simply a fact of like, you got so many pieces right by the Detroit Lions offense. If you just had all of them, that you didn't care that like Jahmyr Gibbs was putting up 19 points at his 7 whatever salary. It was the fact that like you got access to all of these bulk points being scored. And that's a viable way to approach any slate, especially this season, where if you get one of those like bulk bets right, like a team environment overstack or a game environment bet, it's that much more, or it's that much less likely that another game environment is coming close because of scoring is down and passing touchdowns down and all the things that we've talked about. So these team overstacks, these game environment bets are much more relevant and important this season. So I think it's good process. The guys that shipped major GPPs this week of having Detroit Lions overstacks, I think it's completely viable, more than viable. It's probably borderline optimal in the current state of DFS right now.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I think you're right. I agree with you. All right, so let's unless you had anything else, I was going to jump into DraftKings here. You ready to go and start looking at
Yeah,
this
let's do it. So disclaimer, this is my first look at salary. This is my first look at the slate. So we're going to go, we didn't spend a lot of time on this stuff before because I wanted to get like quicker into the build itself, because we're going to start like at the ground zero. We're going to start at the bottom and kind of work our way through like logically through the slate. So we'll do that for the next 25 minutes.
Yeah, and this, I mean, are you gonna? I got the 555 milli here. Do you think that's what you're looking at this weekend?
We got to, yeah, we got to. Back-to-back weeks. It's crazy. We don't see that very often. Yeah. I think they are doing it now because next weekend is the Thanksgiving slate and then a small slate for the main slate. So I think that's why they're doing the 555 again, because they're probably not doing it next week.
Cool. Yep, absolutely. So with this slate, where do you want to start? I mean, you got, your over-unders. I mean, just the stud quarterbacks are largely absent from this.
Yeah.
And then some good totals. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm going to take the wheel real quick. And we're going to look at kind of like how the process is done here.
Oh, yeah, go for it. Yep.
So the first thing, I'll give it back to you after we do this, but this is obviously OWS. And over here you see the game totals and the Vegas implied team totals. When we're looking at this slate, it's like, okay, we expect the Chiefs to be successful against the Panthers. That makes sense. The Vikings and the Bears, 2 of the probably top 5 defenses in the league right now. So that makes sense. They have a 39.5 point game total. Texans expected to wax the Titans. I have my own thoughts and opinions on this. I think the Titans could put up a bigger fight than what Vegas is implying right now. The Texans are very clearly still working through a bunch of stuff on offense. Nico Collins returned to like a 53% snap rate, 57% route participation rate on Monday Night Football. So there's a lot of uncertainties, I think, with this game that I think it's probably the game total is probably pretty close, but the line is probably a little bit too heavy in favor of the Texans. Then we look at the Lions and the Colts. We expect the Lions to have success against a static Colts defense, but we know the Colts have gotten DeForest Buckner back the last 2 games. He is a big part of what makes this defense not suck. Let's say let's plainly, because of everything behind him is so static, but they rely on that disruption that he's able to create up front to kind of be an effective defense. So a lot of uncertainties there, but we know Anthony Richardson looked more competent, 66.6% completion rate after 44% in his first stint as the starter. But that offense looked different. And we alluded to the fact that like, hey, this offense could look different in Anthony Richardson's second stint as the starter. Yeah. They very clearly started the season like, hey, let's try and develop his passing. He had an 8% or 7% scramble rate when pressured. That was down from like 32% in his rookie season. Very small sample, but you get the point. To me, it was this Shane Steichen is trying to create the next Lamar Jackson. That's what we saw in the beginning of the season. Their offense was structured based on timing, based on reads. They're trying to develop his pocket presence. Now it kind of was a little bit more like, Let's design an offense around Richardson, which we were all hoping for to start the season, but didn't necessarily happen. I think that's happening now. And if there's any offensive mind that can change an offense completely in the middle of the season, it's probably Shane Steichen. So there's some upside there in that game environment if the Colts are able to punch back. The Dolphins, we expect them to take care of business rather handily against the Patriots, although with Drake May under center, this offense can put up a fight as well. So that's, the other side of that coin is the Dolphins defense are playing really well right now. Then you have the Bucs and the Giants. We expect the Bucs, with potentially getting Mike Evans back, to handle the Giants with Tommy DeVito as the starting quarterback, which we were all concerned with in best ball with Daniel Jones. He had the injury clause in his contract. So this is the Giants' way of saving guaranteed money and potentially moving on from Daniel Jones after this season. The Cowboys are in a complete state of disarray. Do we see Trey Lance? Do they want to take an extended look at Trey Lance for the rest of the season? Their season is done. They kind of know that Cooper Rush isn't the answer. They might want to get an extended look at Trey Lance for either primary backup duties for the future or to kind of build a trade portfolio for him. So I think we might see Trey Lance moving forward for the Cowboys, but we expect the Washington Commanders to take care of business against the Cowboys at home. Then in the afternoon, you have a Broncos team that is playing some very, very good football on both sides of the ball against a Raiders team that's in a state of disarray. Yeah. What we're getting at is like there is a lot of one-sided potential on this slate.
Yes.
Then you look at the 49ers and the Packers. These are two coaches that are bred from the same cloth that are more so looking to outmaneuver their opponents as opposed to getting into a shootout immediately when we start a game. So while there are paths to this game environment erupting, they're probably they're probably thinner than the field is probably going to be expecting in this type of game environment. And then you have the Cardinals and the Seahawks in an NFC West division that every team is within half a game. So the 49ers are currently in last place in the division, but they're within a half a game. So that is
that's so funny to say.
This game means a whole hell of a lot. It's a pick 'em currently with a solid game total, 47.5. So what I'm getting at here is there aren't really any game environments where we're highlighting being like, we need to keep this game environment around in mind, or we need to be building around this game environment. Or even this game environment has a much better chance than any other on the slate to develop into something that you had to have.
Right.
So how do we frame our mindset now when we're looking at the slate from a top-down approach first, just diagnosing the slate? Well, one, we don't have the Saints, Jaguars, Jets, Bills, Bengals, Falcons. We don't have all those teams. We don't have Lamar Jackson and the Ravens because they're playing on Monday night. And then on Thursday, we don't have some of the value quarterbacks that we've been looking to attack in Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston. Yeah. So this slate suddenly becomes, it's a small slate. We have 6 teams on bye. We have a standard Thursday night, standard Monday night football game. But I'll let you take the wheel again. If we now pull up DraftKings and look at the quarterback position, it's like, who on this slate are we comfortable saying they have put the slate out of reach within their range of outcomes? And it's really nobody.
Yeah.
It really is nobody. We expect the Commanders to control the game against Dallas. They have been much more run heavy in that type of game environment. We don't expect them to come out and say, we have to win this game by 40 points. They need to win this game. That's really how this team approaches it. So if they're doing that, probably going to see a 3-headed backfield, plus Jaden Daniels, what he can do on the ground. So there's not really anybody that sticks out on paper from the offense. And I would say it would take a lot going right in Jaden Daniels' favor for him to have put the slate out of reach upside. We have Patrick Mahomes against Carolina. Similar story. They're looking to just win games. They don't care how that happens. They're expecting Isaiah Pacheco back. It becomes this situation where Patrick Mahomes probably doesn't even have put the slate out of reach upside in this spot against a Carolina Panthers team that is near the bottom of the league in a lot of defensive metrics. Jordan Love, same discussion. Like they're in that game environment where it's like, so again, the point here is there's not really any. And over the last 3 or 4 slates, we've had 1 or 2 quarterbacks that could put that slate out. Last week, it was only Lamar. Then Jared Goff comes into town and what happened. But when you have a slate where there's so few players at the onesie positions that can put it out of reach, you need less of them to fail. If there's 0, now it's like, do I overpay for a quarterback whose median projection is probably looking nice, but has very few paths to putting the slate out of reach? Or do I pay down and create one of these quote unquote like Hilow-ism value stacks? And the goal of the value stack is you need your quarterback, to put up like 24 to 26 DK points. You need a concentrated offense behind him to have a very good, like a good chance of knowing where the volume is going through the air. Because now if you're talking like a quarterback at 5,500 or sub 6K and 2 pass catchers in that same range, we don't need a lot to go right other than that offense succeeding. And if that offense succeeds and we capture the production through the air, we're effectively making a 3-person bet on an offense and just saying, hey, we need this quarterback to throw for 302, which gets him right in that 24 to 26 point range, or like 250 and 3. And if he does that, we're like the fallout of that bet is, hey, it's likely that the production that he's doing there in that range is going to these 2 guys. And that's a way to like this value stack mentality with pricing so tight, and we're hunting for value. We're hunting for the like, who do we play below 5K to make our lineups work? That's a different way to look at value. And I think that's going to be extremely important the rest of the season, because pricing's already been so tight this year. And typically what we see is pricing gets tighter as the season goes on. So that's kind of what we're looking at, and how we get there by like looking at the slate from a top-down approach, analyzing like what we expect scoring to be. We're probably going to see 185 to 195 ship this week. And we can construct our lineups kind of around that idea. So with all that, we're looking at quarterback. Like, are there any value stack potential teams here? And there isn't a ton to love, even in that like that blueprint that we just laid out. But what we do have is we have Baker Mayfield, where we can expect that it's a good possibility that a large portion of the volume is flowing through Mike Evans and Cade Otton. So we could start there, like Baker plus Mike Evans plus Cade Otton. Let's just do that. Let's see kind of where it goes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Mike Evans. There we go.
So it's a kind of like a middling primary stack, we'll say. So we'll just see where the roster kind of flows around this.
Yeah, how the pricing shapes out.
Yeah. Major injuries stuff at wide receiver. That's the kind of where I'm looking at next. Like, do we have guys that are going to have a range of outcomes that does not match their price? And we don't really even have any like major news type stuff. Like Darius Slayton has a concussion, didn't travel to Germany last week. Probably going to be good. Adam Thielen's probably coming back from injury, but he's playing the Chiefs. Like Brandon Cooks is still on IR. Like, we don't really want to go to CD. Like, there's just not a lot to love from a value perspective. And when that's the case, I kind of want to lean a little bit heavier into this game environment. So we'll actually add Malik Neighbors to this roster. And we'll say like, hey, backup quarterback, he's just going to lean on his primary dude. And Tommy DeVito he's not a great backup, but he's shown serviceability in the past.
Yeah, Monday night against Green Bay last year.
Yeah, so this is just saying like, hey, the Giants are hyped up at the quarterback change. Like, we're going to go try and do something. We're going to play for our coach, Brian. We're going to save Brian Dable's job or whatever. I don't know. There's at least like paths to this game environment turning into something that we kind of had to have. So and the reason why we went that direction is like that discussion of, hey, there aren't a lot of game environments that could develop into something you had to have on this slate. the Buccaneers are facing the highest pass rate over expectation. They're the top three. I'd have to go recheck the numbers. We know the Buccaneers are near the top of the league in pass rate over expectation on their own. So they're breeding these game environments. And if it happens in this game, it's likeliest to happen through these players. And if it does happen, it's that much more, less likely that something else comes close. And it all stems from like the top-down look of this slate, and where we really just don't have a lot of confidence.
Yeah, exactly. Tampa Bay has been almost every game they played in has been pretty high scoring.
Yeah, so it's like there's two. We'll say three. There's three teams that we're kind of always like the hair on the back of our neck is standing up when they're on the main slate. It's like the Buccaneers, the Ravens, and the Bengals. Like if those guys are playing, we need to kind of keep an eye on those game environments, because they continue to kind of foster these game environments that are conducive to fantasy production. So we'll start with that. And we have 4,800 left per player, so we don't have a ton. So let's look at defense. See if there's any potential to save something here.
I was looking earlier, and like the only one I was like maybe is the Bears. Minnesota's been, they haven't been putting up a lot of points lately. The Vikings haven't. Not that they turned it over a bunch.
Yeah, I'm gonna go a little bit higher and go to the Broncos at 3,200.
They've been good.
They're like top two in blitz rate, pressure rate. They're generating a lot of sacks, 39 sacks on the season. They haven't necessarily had the turnovers yet. 13 turnovers generated in their 10 games is not great. But against this Raiders team, like they should just be completely overmatched in the trenches. So we'll go to the Broncos there as kind of like our salary saver. So now we got 5,200 left. We should probably start looking at running back. And we'll scroll like down as far as we can and then work our way up.
So maybe around 5K?
Yeah. The first name that sticks out to me is Javonte Williams. Like, how is his role going to look? No idea. Is he even going to be like the primary back? No idea. Is Audric Estime going to continue to eat into it? No idea. But like, he at least makes sense in this roster. So we'll throw him in at 52 to save some salary. And he correlates well with our defense. So we'll keep scrolling up. Like Brian Robinson, like we talked about, could make sense. But actually, let's go to the top. And we'll kind of reverse engineer why we started at the bottom real quick. I don't want to take too much time on this, but again, if you look at the state of this slate from a top-down approach, it's like we got Joe Mixon in a difficult matchup. He's way priced up to 8K. He's very likely to see 20 to 25 carries. He's gone over 100 yards in 4 out of the last 5. He's scored a touchdown in 7 straight games. He's scored 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 touchdowns in his last 6 games. So the dude is balling, right? He's got the volume, but this is a matchup against a Titans team where it's like, the Titans are near the top of the league in points allowed per game. They're not like a scrub defense. They've been playing well without L'Jarius Sneed. So I don't like this game environment like we talked about before. You have Christian McCaffrey at the top against a Packers team that is much better against the run this year than they have been in the past. We also don't know about the status of George Kittle. We have Devon Achane below that, where he carries a very, very good weekly floor, but this offense is also like not, waxing teams off the field as they used to. So, Devon Achane is a fine play on paper relative to his range of outcomes. We were on him last week, obviously. But he doesn't just like scream like I have to fit him in my lineup. Jahmyr Gibbs split in the backfield with Dave Montgomery, Jonathan Taylor, and against the Lions team that he can't run against. Kenneth Walker. So like there's nobody here that you feel great about, like as I need this guy in my roster. So that's why we started at the bottom. And kind of working our way up here. If you continue like David Montgomery, Chuba Hubbard, with Jonathan Brooks likely to make his season debut, James Conner, who is a good bet for like 20 running back opportunities on a weekly basis, but like not really much more than that. So the state of the slate at running back is like these guys are all pretty much overpriced. The only guy up top that I would say isn't overpriced relative to his range of outcomes is Devon Achane. And even then, we're not feeling too great about the play. So that's why we started at the bottom. We worked our way. I mean, even like in the mid range, like DeAndre Swift at 6,100, he saw his second lowest snap rate of the season last week after they had the offensive coordinator change. So while the offense did look better, Swift has a smaller portion of the pie of that offense. So it's really like,
it makes sense.
I don't know where to go. So
well,
that's why we started low.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, no, yeah. I was just going to say it makes sense. Just it's kind of like when we've had that discussion about quarterbacks, like who on here is going to do you have to pay up for because they're going to put the slate out of reach? And there just isn't anyone that, like you said, is like really that screaming, like, I got to play this player.
Yeah. So now there's one other name in the mid range where we could consider, and that's Tyrone Tracy. So it's this, while it is highly unlikely that the Giants put up enough points on the scoreboard to warrant two players from their team, we do have a decision point here of do we go with Tyrone Tracy or do we go with Malik Neighbors? So we'll keep that in our back pocket. And we'll see what we got at wide receiver to fill out the roster. And if we need the salary savings, we'll probably come down from Neighbors to Tracy.
Good stuff.
All right. So we'll take a quick look through the wide receivers. Tyreek Hill is probably fundamentally underpriced relative to his range of outcomes in this spot. The Dolphins have been getting destroyed by perimeter wide receivers, or not the Dolphins, the Patriots have been destroyed by perimeter wide receivers this season. So we'll keep him in mind. Josh Downs is at least a little bit interesting, but the volume isn't necessarily there with Anthony Richardson. So like continuing down, like Marvin Harrison, 6,100, we don't necessarily love going there. Calvin Ridley potentially at 5,700. So let's see. Is there anything that like jumps off the page here?
I feel like a couple of guys' prices have dropped. I was looking.
Like Jacoby Myers has dropped.
Calvin Ridley has dropped. Jaden Reed for Green Bay. He was 6,400 last weekend, and he's 5,900. So I feel like a couple players have seen price drops that maybe it's for the matchup. But it didn't.
You know what? Let's go Roma Dunze at 4,800. He's way too cheap for. I mean, he saw 10 targets in this new look offense last week.
Yeah, dude, nice call.
And he's playing a Vikings team that is one of the bigger pass funnel defenses in the league. So that saved us a little bit.
That's nice. Nice on the fly, dude, picking that out.
Yeah, let's keep looking at wide receiver and see if there's anything. Because we kind of had this range in mind around like 6K for running back.
Just gonna glance at Cortland Sutton's targets. I mean, yeah, he's still getting targets.
Cortland Sutton over the last month, over the last 4 games, is putting up like a high-end wide receiver 2, low-end wide receiver 1 profile. So his expected fantasy points, his fantasy points per route run, his first read target rate, his targets per route run, his target share, all of that is like back-end wide receiver 1 profile and high-end wide receiver 2 profile. So he makes a lot of sense, but he does not necessarily correlate well to having the defense also on the roster. Because that team is likelier, if they're controlling a game with their defense, to end Bo Nix in the 30 to 32 pass attempt range. And if we're playing Sutton, we probably want a little more than that.
What about Watson for Green Bay? Like, does San Francisco give up deep targets? I mean, his price has crept up a bit to 52.
They do, because they don't have the same talent on the back end as they've had in recent years, but their MO is to try and force things short.
Okay. Yeah.
But
so it's like,
if we look at let me see Watson's snap rate last week. Watson played 67% of the offensive snaps, still sharing a role with Dontavian Wicks. So that doesn't like get my juices flowing or anything. We could.
Okay. So
yeah, dude, there's really not a ton to love.
Oh, that was another guy, Pierce. I mean, again, he's not a great play necessarily, but I just noticed his price drop, Pierce, for the Colts. From
Yeah, he's
54
been
to 4,900.
overpriced. He's been overpriced for the bulk of the season here. Like we could go. I'm looking at Worthy, the guy on the Chiefs that can do a lot of damage on minimal target volume, but like the mental mistakes are really driving Andy Reid crazy, I think. Yeah, so
don't want to be in the doghouse with the coach, that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, if we put in Worthy, we got 58 left. That's like Brian Robinson range.
Yeah, I think so.
If we put in,
Robinson.
Let's do this. Let's do this. Let's take Neighbors out. Let's put in Tyrone Tracy. Let's put in Tyreek Hill at 72. And now we got 5K for a flex, which is right in the range of we were just looking at. And then we'll just go Worthy.
Okay. Yeah, let's do it.
Bingo bango.
There we go, man. Awesome. Podcast-wise, for those of you listening on the pod, the lineup we landed on was Baker at the QB stacked with Mike Evans, Kate Otten, and then Javonte Williams. No, wait, not Javonte. Javonte Williams. Tyrone Tracy, Tyreek Hill, Rome Odunze, Xavier Worthy, and the Broncos D. Hilow, I love that, man. That was really almost like a Slate overview because we went over all the different positions, walked through kind of what kind of the upside was for the different pieces. So super valuable. Anything else you want to add before we ship this one?
Yeah, no, I just want to spend a little extra time like going through the process of kind of what we're looking at, especially on this slate where this is like our last main slate prior to things getting really wonky. Like we're going to see a lot more like Saturday games coming up. We're going to see like we got Thanksgiving. We're going to see the new like NFL trying to compete with the NBA Christmas shenanigans. So the main slates are going to be smaller. So this is a good like first look because we got 6 teams on bye. We have a main slate of how many games are on this? Is it 10 or 11?
10 games.
10 games. Yeah. So smaller slate, fewer opportunities for fantasy points to be amassed. And we have a lot of the top end quarterbacks off the slate. A lot of the top end tight ends are actually on this slate. So that's something to think about too. Like Brock Bowers, George Kittle, potentially Travis Kelce, Trey McBride. Another thing to keep in mind is Jake Ferguson suffered a concussion on Monday, and he was immediately ruled out, which means he immediately entered the concussion protocol. And on a short week, we could see a guy like Luke Schoonmaker. Shout outs to the OWS fam for correcting my pronunciation on him. But he's a potential value option at tight end. He's min priced, and he saw it coming off of a 10 target game.
Awesome.
So keep in mind on that. That's it, man. That's all I got.
Awesome, dude. Love it. As always, guys, good luck as you start to get prepared for week 12. And Hilow, as always, appreciate the time, brother. And we'll see you.